So welcome everyone to our event, Finding Calm During Chaos, Radio's Role When Disasters Strike. Thank you all for joining us here today. So I'm Tara Spickerhoff, the Communications Manager at Farm Radio International. I've been working out of our Ottawa office here for the past 7 years, though I got my start with Farm Radio International as an intern based in Ghana in 2015. I've also spent some time in the trenches of local news in the interior of British Columbia. So I'm delighted to be moderating this event today. And before we begin, I just want to point out a couple of things. We'll be having a half an hour or so moderated discussion with a Q&A session at the end. So you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A box. Or if you're joining via mobile or on your browser, you can likely find it by clicking 3 dots that should say more. There, you're welcome to type in and leave any questions that you have throughout the event, and I'll make sure that we'll be able to answer them either in writing or answer them live towards the event at the end of the event. And the Q&A box is giving you trouble, you're having a hard time finding it or using it, feel free to write your questions in the chat, and there may even be an opportunity for you to ask your question live at the end of the session. So thank you so much. Before we get to that point, though, allow me to introduce our guests. I have joining with me today 2 of our lovely staff members at Farm Radio International. The first is Gertrude Nalubinga. Gertrude is quite kindly joining us late in the day from Uganda, where she serves as Farm Radio's Program Development and Network Initiatives Coordinator. She spent the past 12 years managing projects in Uganda, many of which for Farm Radio International, and has a passion for human rights and women's rights. I also have with us Julie Langelier, Farm Radio International's head of projects. Julie is based in Montreal, but came to Farm Radio with a long history of working in communication and media development, particularly in humanitarian contexts, where she has worked in places like East Timor, South Sudan, Indonesia, Niger, and Ukraine, among others. Welcome, Julie. Welcome, Gertrude. I'm looking forward to having this conversation about Farm Radio's work in emergency and humanitarian contexts with you. Okay, so I wanted to start this conversation by explaining a little bit about what Farm Radio is doing right now. We've been talking a fair amount, both internally at Farm Radio and at the office and externally. Perhaps our guests have heard us mention this word about what we call early warning systems. So Julie, could you perhaps explain what an early warning system is for everyone? Oh, you're just on mute.
Of course, I'm on mute. When we talk about early warning system, we mean the tool and information that help community know that the danger is coming before it actually arrives. We're talking about floods, drought, disease outbreak. And the goal is simple, is to give people enough time to protect themselves, their families, and their livelihood. In many parts of Africa, this information exists. Weather agencies and humanitarian organizations are tracking storms, rainfalls, crop conditions every day. The challenge is that this information often doesn't reach people who need it the most, especially farmers in rural areas, people who may not have internet or phone network access, or people who only speak local languages, and who rely to stay informed, to rely on radio. So that's where Farm Radio makes a unique difference. We work with local radio station to translate scientific forecasts into clear, easy to digest, practical advice that listener can understand and act on. For instance, when to move livestock to higher ground when flood is coming, or how to store seeds before heavy rains, and also where to access emergency support.
Right. So this is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Did I interrupt you? No. So this is something like in Canada, for example, I live in Ottawa. We're in a bit of a tornado zone. It might be something like the alert that I receive on my phone about tornadoes, right? But with a little bit more information attached.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
And then we've combined it with radio in order to give people that context.
Yes. And to give more depth than just like a very short message. So we use both radio, but also text messages and any, depending on the context, also other tools on social media when it's relevant.
Right. Just to like give the people who are watching a little bit of context, in some ways, this reminds me a lot of when I was living in British Columbia. I worked for a local paper, but um, it was during the summer of 2017, which is when there were a huge amount of wildfires in BC. So this was right after the Fort McMurray fires, about a year later. And I kind of lived in that community as they were building some of these systems for early warning, where I would get a text message that would say, there's an evacuation alert in your area, or please be prepared to evacuate. And eventually we ended up evacuating ourselves. Despite the fact that I was working at the local paper, I first heard about the evacuation in my community on the local radio channel that we had running at all times, who gave us kind of context about what roads to use and how we needed to get out of town and what our time limit was and things like that. And eventually, when we ended up on the road, we turned the channel to CBC, who were running a live 2 hour special. Well, actually, it was longer than that, as we drove out of town, telling us what to expect ahead and what was going on behind us in the town that we were leaving. And so I imagine that it's something like that, but with some differences. Is that the case?
I think it's very similar. I think you explained it well. It's quite concrete example, Taha. I mean, you'll hear more examples from the conversation today. But perhaps, yeah, Gertrude, maybe you can tell us a bit how we do this work in Uganda, how we're setting up this early warning system, or how we're contributing to the early warning system there.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. And thank you, Tara. I think it's not so very different, but as you say, context matters. So in Uganda, Farm Radio worked with the World Food Program and several partners, and these included, among others, Uganda Department of Meteorology, as well as the local radio stations. And together we established what we call a radio-based early warning system. We basically used radio and mobile phones to provide alerts or early warning messages on weather and climate to farmers, especially those in rural communities. In this case, we were focusing on the Karamoja region.
Richard, we've just lost your sound.
Of Uganda.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Sorry,
You're
are
back.
you able to hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
There's an interruption. So we worked in the Karamoja region, and we were looking at the Karamoja region is in northeastern Uganda. That area is a bit a semi-arid area. It's usually very dry, and it has very many livestock keepers. And then we also used the radio-based early warning system to serve the people in southwestern Uganda. So in southwestern, it's a bit hilly, and they experience a lot of floods and mudslides. So we worked with the radio stations to produce and air about 50 episodes focusing on various climate information and also looking at what these people keep in terms of livestock, the crops they grow. So, for instance, messages would come like when the dry season is coming, we would give a message in the local language. For example, it's always good for you to consider smart or risk-based vaccination for your livestock in readiness for transition. And such a message could go when it's almost coming to the dry season. During the dry season, cattle keepers move a lot with their animals. They move long distances. So we help them to prepare through a message like that. And some of these messages would go using text in the local language or audio-based because some are unable to read. Yes, that is what we did or are doing in Uganda.
So I've given some examples in Canada, for example, that are very much emergency situations. You know, something major is happening right now. But why is developing a tool like this so important to people in Uganda? Like, why is this necessary?
Yeah, yes, Sarah, it's very important and it's very necessary because majority of the farmers in Uganda, first of all, they are subsistence farmers. They grow for their families. And then many of them are situated in rural communities. As Julie mentioned earlier, that there are challenges of infrastructure. So in these local communities, we have poor communication infrastructure. They are far to reach areas, and many times the internet is poor, and also affordability is still a challenge. The internet is there, but then many cannot afford. So they struggle to get the right information on time. They struggle to also use modern technologies. For example, we have so many agriculture and weather information apps that have come up. They offer a lot, I must say. But then our farmers in rural communities, especially women, they are left out because they're not able to use these apps. And many times these apps are using English, so radio still makes sense to them. It touches the core. Um, the other reason why it's important is that much as the Uganda Meteorology Agency does a very good job of producing climate information, producing seasonal weather outlooks and recommended actions, but it's produced in English. So some farmers call it too scientific, others are unable to read it or to even interpret it, so they will not act upon it. So they still prefer simplified messages that we share through radio, through the basic mobile phone messages that we send as advisories. For example, when I say create fire lines around your homestead and garden to avoid fires to destroy your property. It's as simple as that. There's no science in it. It's just a simple message. Only that the difference is that we present it in the local language. But again, when it comes to early warning, it differs depending on the context, as earlier on mentioned, and it depends on where you go, where you are. I know that we are doing similar work in Madagascar. Perhaps, Julie, I could pass on the mic to you and you try to explain the differences that you note. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So just like Karamoja region in Uganda, where we work in Madagascar, and this is quite new for farm radio. We started a few months back. It's a region that is overly impacted by climate change. No? Like we see climate change here in Canada. We feel it every year, the impact and the changes. But in those in specific regions where it's extremely dry, with regions with very little rainfall, it's people are, it has huge consequences on their lives. So the region where we work in, it's the southern part of Madagascar. We work with two radio stations that are serving isolated population, where that is, both are quite dry and not necessarily the regions that are directly impacted by typhoons, but that receive a strong ripple effect of cyclones and typhoons, meaning huge rainfalls for very intensive period of time that leads to floods, no? In addition to drought. So they're dealing with both. And it's a region that is classified as severe or emergency food insecurity levels. So as I said, it's those two radio stations we work with have very low resources. They barely can access internet, so we communicate with the radio broadcasters by WhatsApp, but they have to move to locations to get internet. So the community they serve also, as I said, very difficult access to phone, Internet is, definitely a challenge. So radio is the way to go. Those stations, what they shared with us, because we went to provide a training in October, and they said, well, they were really enthusiastic because it was one of their few opportunities, and for many of their staff, the first opportunity they had to learn how to develop a radio program to be attractive and to make sense to the community. And this one specifically tailored for climate events. So we work a lot on the role of radio station before, during, and after a climate event. How to build relationship with the information providers, so the Meteo department, but in Madagascar there's also the National Bureau for Disasters Risk Management, and also all the humanitarian organizations that can help them to fine-tune, like the information they can provide. So we're building that system, let's say, of exchange of information between the radio stations and the actors on the ground, and we want this to be sustainable and to work in long term without us. I think that's and we double it with SMS. So we're building a database of phone network of the communities and community leaders, and to make sure that we are reaching to the specific communities there in Bekele and Tiombe, because this is where we want to see like how we're focusing on those two communities that are heavily impacted by those weather events.
It's interesting because we think we live in a very digital society where we're always using technology. Like, we're on Zoom right now. Gertrude's connected with us from Uganda. We're very interactive, and we keep mentioning radio, which is a 100-year-old technology. So I'm sure there are still people who ask the question, why, when we have all of these interesting new tools, mobile phones, AI, are we even still using radio? So I might pose that question to you, Gertrude. Is it still even useful to be using radio to support this?
Oh, yes, Tara, it is still very, very useful, at least when it comes to countries like Uganda. Radio remains the main source of climate and agriculture information. Farmers still appreciate the timely and actionable alerts that they receive through radio. And this is because they come in their mother language. They relate with those broadcasters. They love the way they relay the messages. Farm radio builds the capacity of radio broadcasters, working with, of course, different partners to see that the messages make sense. So we are seeing that this is helping to minimize some of the economic losses that would have been experienced. For example, crops and livestock that could have been lost because of floods, the droughts, the fires. So there's lower risk in agriculture because information is received early and it is understood. This is not to say that information has not been around. It has been there, it is provided, but how it has been provided. So radio matters, and it's still very useful because we're seeing that families are preparing better. I could give another example of a message that we crafted. We said, okay, for example, we are expecting heavy rain. Mudslides and floods are likely to happen. So rocks will likely roll off your homes, and you will likely lose life or your sources of livelihoods. You are advised to evacuate and leave the dangerous places to save yourself and your family. Um, so such an audio message we sent to southwestern Uganda because, as I mentioned earlier, it is a hilly area. So when the rains, there's too much rain, rocks roll off and people indeed lose lives. Gardens are washed away. So we try to help the families plan better. If sometimes looking at Karamoja, we said we advise them to grow drought tolerant crops. or fast maturing seeds to protect themselves from being food insecure. So they are able to meet their food needs, plan for them before the dry seasons. Yes, I could give it context like that, why I still see radio as very useful. The digital apps, the digital era is good, but also radio is still very relevant and makes sense to those people in communities that are not to get the information. Thank
Yeah,
you, Tara. Over to you.
the idea of using technologies that people are using to get them information in a way that's accessible and in their own language. And I think radio does that pretty well. No, we're kind of exploring new or different ways to use radio in humanitarian projects, in emergency contexts, and things like that, Julie. So I've heard you use the term radio is a first responder before. So can I ask you to talk a little bit about other ways that we're using interactive radio in these humanitarian contexts?
Yes, sure. Um, so as you said, at Farm Radio, we truly believe that radio broadcasters are first responders. They're true humanitarian responders, and that they should be treated this way. We believe that information is aid, same as food staples or digging wells, for instance. People need information to keep their family safe. It's as important as other response in an emergency. And we also see that radio broadcasters and local media, they're part of their own communities. When there's a crisis happens, they're already there. They're on the ground, and they have a special role already in the community where they understand the information needs of their people quite well. They know how to make information digest for their people. And they also are quite well positioned to understand the needs of their communities because, they interact with them, they interview, they get information. So they are also well positioned to relay information to the decision makers, the service providers, the other humanitarian responders. So we feel that that we want local media and radio broadcasters to be better embedded in humanitarian responses. They are the local actors. They are localizations. They're already there, and also they bring transparency, accountability. As a third party. Responder there, no? So we really want to, we advocate for this in the humanitarian sector. Now, when we work with radio station at Farm Radio, and this is for humanitarian, but also for any type of work we do, we think that listening is very important. So we set up, we work with radio stations so that most of them already have, but, community listening groups to understand if the radio programs are really hitting the button, like if they're appealing, if it's really working for the communities who are listening to them, but also working with community listening group to really get a sense on what are the priorities, the concerns, the questions of the communities, and what are their real information needs. And we feel that radio can be through community listening group, but also through other tools that we help a radio station to work with, like the ULISA system, which is interactive voice response tools. That we can collect feedbacks and concerns, priorities, community insights that help the radio programming, but also helps the response themselves. We can relay this information to humanitarians so that they can fine-tune the response or pivot the response to something else. As if the community says, no, priority is not water at the moment. Water we have, what we really need is like the clinic has been destroyed, and we are worried about the health of the elderly people. For instance, I'm just making up an example here. Yeah, so radio station has first responders. They're in the community. They are the community, and they can be more impactful than bringing only external humanitarian organization, but also radio as a way to listen to communities and improve the response.
It's not just a way of getting people information about what they need. It's also a way of ensuring that we have feedback and we're having conversations about what communities need in any given moment.
Yes, exactly. And also by community being able to inform the response, it gives them a sense of agency and dignity, and that's where we are.
That makes sense.
Mm.
I think you kind of hit on a really interesting point there. We're talking about communities in general and how we can support them, but it's also about individuals who are the people that are really impacted and affected on a day-to-day basis. And something that really stands out to me, especially when I'm talking with my colleagues, colleagues like Gertrude, like yourself, is the stories that they bring back from each community that talks about how they've impacted individuals. So I'm wondering, Gertrude, if you might be able to share one of those stories with us right now.
All right. Thank you, Tara. So, see, there are several stories that stand out, but I'll just pick on one from northern Uganda. So, as we went about evaluating the impact of using radio to send out these climate alerts or making early warning messages, so we talked to one of the group members called Maria Lokore. She comes from a group in Kotido, a farmers group, which also doubled as a community listening group. So she is in a farmers group in Kotido district. And what she told us that they used to struggle a lot during the planting season. They were uncertain about the rain. They would not know when to plant, and they would watch their crops get spoiled or failed because they planted during the wrong season, so because they don't have information. So many times they were also unable to recognize some of the plant diseases, and also how often they occur and in which seasons. But she told us that as she kept listening to the radio programs, the agriculture radio programs, which embedded those alerts, the advisories, and also receiving messages uh, by listening to radio, she understood when to plant, that how to utilize the early planting season to target the rainy season. And uh, her and her group mates have adopted some better agriculture practices. For example, they used to burn the failed crops, and they used to burn failed crops, and also they didn't know what to do with the agricultural waste. But since they got expert advice, they've since moved on to utilize the agricultural waste as mulch and also turn it into organic manure. So they're receiving better yields. And for me, I felt that that's the difference that radio is making. Then she also mentioned that she heard and they were advised to, rather than walking long distances to look for water, searching for water for their animals, they could rather dig some water dams as a community, work together to harvest water for their animals and also to use for irrigation. And this made me feel so good and happy because obviously she was sharing the lessons emerging, and it was clear that the lives of people in the community of Kolusupa, where she comes from, they were changing because of receiving this information in a timely manner and in a way that they can easily interpret. Yes, Tara, that's one experience I can offer to you. The others are many. They're also working. There's also working with leaders. They also had their stories.
It's so rich
Thank
to
you.
be able to hear these experiences from you. So thank you so much for sharing. Of course, this work is not always easy. So I'm wondering, Julie, a little bit, what are some of the challenges that we've encountered in doing this?
Yeah, challenges. There are challenges. Well, we'll put out an example from the work we're doing in Madagascar. As I said before, we're there to strengthen the early warning system that somehow already is being set up by different by the government and helped by humanitarian organizations. Now, our intention is to make sure that to build that strong relationship between the radio broadcasters and the government, the Bureau for National Disaster and Risk Management, as well as the Met department, meteorological department, and as many probably many of you already know, there's some kind of political revolution or crisis, depending who talks about it in Madagascar at the moment, which makes civil servants very busy and also a bit distracted by other priorities, let's say, and also the people we are engaging with, they may or may not keep their jobs because the government is changing, is evolving to something else. So it's we're trying to set up the system so that it works without external information. We could have decided to work to go get meteorological information from information provider that we pay every month. But instead of doing this, we went through let's work with government actors. But now we're impacted by the slow down by the situation. Big learnings there. Yes. The other point I wanted to bring in terms of challenge, but it's opportunities. Like the financial environment, the funding environment is changing. We all know with decisions that have been made with the new government in the US this year, but also many governments are diminishing their funding to international development and humanitarian aid. It means that we have to rethink about how we we set up system for communities to be to be working sustainably. So for us, we see this as an opportunity because we work with existing radio stations. We just want to strengthen their ability to be even more efficient in the response. So we feel that we're in the right place. Yes, but that's where we are at the moment. Challenges.
Emergency situations are challenging by nature, and the funding environment that exists right now, the hope to ensure people can care, working in areas that are unstable, all contributes to why this is so necessary, but also what makes it challenging to do.
Yes.
Wrap up this question and answer, or to wrap up this section of the event before we go and take some questions from our audience, I just want to ask you both, what are your hopes for the future? What do we hope to see in the future in Uganda, in Madagascar, in farm radio's work in general? Maybe I'll start with Gertrude and then end with Julie, and then we can take some questions.
Thank you, Tara. Well, looking into the future, we are hoping that as we see this shift towards the use of new communication technologies and applications, our hope is that radio is not left out because it has existed for ages. It has been tested. It has served millions and millions of people, especially when it comes to Africa. It is still considered a low-cost communication media for engaging millions. And then in Uganda, I can still say that families still go to their gardens carrying a radio handset, like one of the garden tools. So they do listen in as they farm the garden. And then my hope is that we get to see more co-creation of early warning messages with communities involved. I mean, there's need to integrate existing indigenous knowledge from the communities. What are they saying? Working with the meteorology agencies. Sometimes they monopolize this job. Uh, it's okay, it is government, but they need to open it up so that communities are more involved. Our experience in Uganda working with the World Food Program and different partners, we engaged role model farmers, and because they have knowledge, they know how weather behaves in their communities. They know what the birds are saying when they are heading which side. Now, like currently in Uganda, it's the season for grasshoppers. It tells us it's a rainy season. So such knowledge, it needs to be integrated. Then my hope is that there can be better coordination among ministries and the different agencies, ministries like the Ministry of Agriculture, the ministry that is in charge of disaster preparedness. You find that the messages sometimes differ how we relay them. Yes, the meteorology agency produces them, but how we all produce, take them to the communities sometimes differs, and this causes problems in interpretation. We need to define that key role for women and youth rights organizations. They also need to be part of this anticipatory action planning. And lastly, um, my hope is that still governments and donors and different development partners prioritize investments in early warning tools, systems like radio, and could borrow from experiences like what Farm Radio is doing, because we have seen that it works. I think I'll pause at that and give it over to you, Tara and Julie.
Julie, over to you. What do you hope to see in the future?
Well, I wish we could do what we're doing now in Karamoja and Madagascar with more radio stations. We have a network of 1,300 plus radio broadcasters in our network, and many are serving communities that are impacted by climate events and climate change. So expanding to others, helping them to go through this preparation plans. Also, like prepare to be to better program, let's say, with communities, but also think about contingency plans for their own radio stations, about securing infrastructures in terms of when different events happens, floods, hurricane, drought, even conflict. It's another one that we didn't mention, but it's early warning systems are also for conflicts. Securing like a second transmitter, saving fuels in case of emergency, food, sandbags, and so on. So this is a bit where I think that that's where we want to accompany radio stations and our network partners in the future.
Well, thank you both for answering my questions. So at this point, I'll maybe take a couple questions from the audience. So feel free to write any questions you might have in the chat or in the Q&A box. Or if you have the ability to, you can kind of raise your hand in Zoom and I'll unmute you to ask your question. But I'll start with one that's already been asked by Chris Emezu. The question is, we talked a little bit about sharing feedback from communities, like how radio plays a role in listening on things like what is needed, people's perspectives on some themes. So how do we share that feedback from communities with the wider public? And the answer to that might be if you mentioned some of our on-air dialogue work, but I'm not sure if Julie or Gertrude, one of you would like to take that question.
Gertrude, do you want to start?
I could start.
Oh, you go.
Yeah, I could start, and Julie can add. Um, Thank you, Tara, as well. Yes, when we are doing getting feedback from the communities, as Tara has mentioned, one of our approaches that we use to engage communities is the on-air dialogues. And the on-air dialogue is basically that a means in a way of consulting communities, collecting their perspectives on those pertinent issues that those that they find critical. And we gather these through a radio program, regular radio program where we air about a topic, but then put out poll questions that the audience can respond to through the Uliza system that Julie hinted on. That Uliza system is an interactive voice response system, just like your basic mobile phone that telecom network when you're talking and it's giving you opportunity to listen in. So community members get to share their views at no cost through that interactive voice response system, the Uliza system, to also send in messages and also express that which they think is very important to consider. But also in our radio programs, prior to creating the radio programs, we co-create content with the broadcasters, but also representatives of the community, in this case, farmer group members. They come in to share their views, their experiences, and also um, as the programs are airing, there are opportunities of call-ins, and we feature different voices of women, young people. These all trigger listeners or the audience to share feedback. So those are some of the ways. There are many more, but Julie, if you want to also mention anything or share something.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, just to add on what Gertrude said about, we receive feedback through listening groups, but also through this app, well, not app, the IVR system we have, Uliza, that is both, sometimes it's just like a survey, which is like quantitative data. We ask questions and people have options that they're listened to and they can press 1, 2, 3. So we can produce graphs with what our perceptions are, but also people can leave voice messages, answers, voicemails, that we can either reshare on the radio station and have it discussed in a talk show, on the radio. But also when what we also do is when we have those on-air dialogues is we come up with trend analysis, like analysis of what the community's perspectives and feedbacks are. And those we can share, sometimes we share directly with decision makers in policy work, let's say, but also we can do it on social media, to say, hey, this radio station talked to these and these communities in the last weeks. This is what people are saying, and then we share it on different social media platforms. So I'm not sure if Chris, it answers your question, but that's a bit how we're doing
Yeah,
it.
Tara, before you come back, I just wanted to add that, Chris, we also hold what we call dialogue events, and these are held with some of the policy makers, decision makers, but also the information is let out to the public. During the dialogue events, Farm Radio presents views that have been gathered from the communities, the perspectives that we've gathered from communities, the feedback. So it's presented widely and it's reflected on, and it's also an avenue for making sure their perspectives are taken into consideration when planning is happening. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly where I was going to come in, is it's that two-part system between collecting people's opinions and surveying them on what they want, and then making sure that that information gets into the hands of decision makers, and as well as broadcast back to the communities so that they can understand what other people in their communities are saying. So thank you both for that answer, and thank you, Chris, for that question. Second question that we have here is from Louise Atkins, who's based in Ottawa with myself. So she says it's great to hear how radio is a key part of early warning systems. And she wonders with the aid diminishing, so aid from the USA diminishing, are radio partners stable and able to continue their operations even with this diminishment in aid? If one of you is able to answer that, that'd be great.
Okay, Gertrude, let me take a first try and you complete on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we do see the impact of USAID funding cuts. Farm radio works with existing functioning radio station. We don't have it in our practices to set up new radio station with specific streams of funding. But other organizations do. And what we saw, and I was talking with an organization in South Sudan a few weeks back called Association for Media Development of South Sudan, and they went from 40 staff to 6 staff in the last months, and their work is to support all media actors in South Sudan. Also, so for this type of organization, they shrank a lot. For the radio stations, those who were set up with USAID funding, if there's no like a real sustainability approach from the start, it's harder to stay on. Yes, so I would say, yes, we see it. I think many radio stations are working with the small community radio stations are working usually with volunteer staff. And this makes them a bit robust to this type of cuts. But of course, there's often cost related to fuel, and it's becoming more precarious. So maybe Gertrude, you have other examples in mind.
Thank you, Julie. I think you have said it well. What I could say is that this is an aspect of sustainability. And what I could say is that already the radio station broadcasters are trained. The training stays with them. Even when farm radio pulls away or pulls out, they still continue. And also the relationships we build during the process of co-creating information, interpreting the climate information, all this is learning and creating of relationships. So it's really, the relationships also matter. Previously, some of the things that we've had, for example, you talk to the public sector and they're saying airtime is very expensive. We can't use radio. We don't know how do you afford it. But when they work together and they realize that they need each other and they learn from each other, then they create opportunities to work together. So we see that has worked, and farm radio is creating that, helping to bridge that gap between broadcasters or radio station partners and those other different specialists. So they can still continue without farm radio because the learning continues.
Yeah, so it really seems to be dependent on where that radio station was getting the majority of their funding from to begin with. So for us at Farm Radio, like we work with stations that are already existing, that already have independent sources of funding, but some of those have been harmed by the cuts to USAID, and other ones are funded by the government, or they're funded by a community, or they're a commercial radio station. So it really depends on the station.
Yeah, maybe the other thing I could say is that the radio programs are usually existing, also agriculture radio programs. Sometimes farm radio can help a local radio station to set up a radio program, but they already have existing agriculture radio programs. So we help them boost the quality, create interactive components in it to discuss the information, the climate information that is being given. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that is also an aspect of long-term use of the services.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, Louise, for that question. Another question from Chris. Feel free to drop in. We probably have time for one or two more questions. The question from Chris is, how do we see our work in relation to artificial intelligence and the global artificial intelligence discourse? So AI is, of course, transforming many sectors. On one hand, it's important to ensure it benefits and not extracts from communities. So he has two questions on top of that. Are there works and projects leveraging AI that Farm Radio has been involved in? And two, he imagines that the work Farm Radio is doing with communities will be a source of voice data that powers AI use cases. What is Farm Radio's view on that? What is the community's view on that? A very complicated and large question, one that I think many people in the industry are grappling with. I can tackle part of it, but if Julie or Gertrude, you want to start, feel free.
I have something
Oh,
to say. Gertrude,
mhm.
if you want, you go first. But yeah. But Taha, I know you
Julie.
also have good points. So.
All right. If you
Okay,
want to start, Julie, or whoever wants to go.
I
go
could
first.
say that. Okay,
We're fighting. Go first, Gertrude. Go
I
first.
okay. Thank you, Chris, for that question. It seems you're looking into Farm Radio's future already. I could say that one of the experiences or projects that or innovations I could say that Farm Radio is working on with a partner called IFPRI is to develop an automatic speech recognition tool, and we are using artificial intelligence to do this. We are basing on the large volume of voice data that Farm Radio receives through its radio programs, because already we had noted that we have a rich data set of local languages which is localized, I would say. But then our challenge has been transcribing and translating all this data to analyze it and make sense of it. We make use of it. We have people who help to monitor and see how it comes in, but then we have not been as efficient. So we are using AI to transcribe some of the voice data that we are using, we are getting. And this is happening. This is an innovation that is going on, and for the Luganda, particularly, and the Bambara languages. Luganda comes from Uganda, and the Bambara is from West Africa in Mali. So we are trying to build a model around this. I think I could stop at that, and my colleagues could add something.
Please go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, thank you, Gertrude, for explaining, our local language, machine learning, exploration with and AI and so on. I think it's very important. One thing that we are recognizing, AI is hitting us, all of us, very fast, definitely. But we see that it's definitely digging deeper, or expanding the divide between literate or elites or community people who have better access to information, can speak English or learn who understand Arabic, Swahili, the big languages, and those who don't. So that we feel that there's a big role to play in that space, so that we don't let it go this way. We want communities who have less access to information resources to get to the same level. We don't want them to be left in away. So we also see that working with radio stations, but also for the communities, there's a big need in AI literacy. It's one thing to know that AI exists, and it's another thing to understand how to use it in a way that is safe, but also that really makes sense, that is not only also reproducing biases and so on. So we're exploring that space, Chris. we're there. Yeah, over to you, Taha. Maybe you.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Gertrude and Julie covered where I was going to go. One, that we're looking at AI as a tool and increasing that tool to local languages, because right now, if you exist and you live in a language that is outside of the kind of global languages that we see spoken and talked in, AI models don't really exist. So there's always that element of it that we're looking at using and talking about. Secondly, is making sure that that digital divide, that bias that sometimes AI models have, and sometimes they have a tendency to hallucinate or make up information, is one that we've worked with the people that we work with to train them on how to be skeptical and how to use those properly and how to use them as tools and not as a replacement for your work. So there's a lot going into this conversation. It's one that we're continuing to have and think about and will continue to have and think about.
Just
This
a
last,
small
I'm going to take,
point, Sarah.
please go ahead, Gertrude.
I was just saying that while Farm Radio is using AI, we are looking at those low resource languages that are not used, that are not common. The languages like Luganda, it's common in Uganda, but not elsewhere. So we are looking at those people in communities that are not engaged, those views that are not captured. We are looking at the aspect of inclusion, and this is where we are heading.
With 3 minutes left, I'm just going to acknowledge that there's a couple questions outstanding. One question here that from Jim Fisher, who asks, are there places where your messages are censored by local governments, and are there places where local governments require a certain kind of messaging? How do you handle this kind of thing? I'll give the concise answer so that we can wrap up before the end of the hour, which is, for the most part, Farm Radio International is dealing in questions of international development, of agriculture, of gender equality, of things that are often supported by the governments that we're working with. And so we don't often face censorship. If we were working in a world where there was more, we were looking more at journalists and conducting accountability interviews, sometimes you do see that on occasion. And we do try our best to work with governments to make sure that we are promoting local agendas towards international development, towards development in these communities. And so we do encounter this and rub up against it, but for the most part, we're really trying to align with things that benefit communities. And so we're often a very neutral party in these. It does happen on occasion. And I think we'd love to get back to you with a more thorough answer, but unfortunately we've run out of time. And so perhaps we'll follow up with you, Jim. And I'd also just like to acknowledge the question from Tewodros Amuma that we're not going to get to today, but perhaps we'll follow up with you by email as well. So I want to thank you both, Julie and Gertrude, for sharing your time and experience here with us today. I think it's really clear how valuable systems like these can be for people in emergency contexts. I know, and I refer back to this all the time because it was a formative moment in my life. It's really clear how valuable systems can be for people in emergency contexts. So for me, when I was in the wildfires in BC, it did feel a bit like we were just figuring out how to use those alert systems in Canada at the time. So I can't imagine how important it would be to help build those systems to begin with in a place where people are more vulnerable than they are in North America. Or where that infrastructure doesn't even exist yet. And so with climate change, I can imagine that these emergency scenarios are likely to keep happening more and more, which means that this work becomes only more urgent. As you've heard, this is really the beginning of this work for Farm Radio. We've tested it in Uganda, we're building it in Madagascar at the moment, but I know that there is more that we can do with the support of people like our attendees who are here today. So I'd like to encourage them. Thank you so much if you've already given a donation to Farm Radio, but please consider donating either by using the link that we're about to throw in the chat right now, or by going to farmradio.org/donate. And once again, please let me extend a warm thank you to everyone who has already donated, to our guests, Gertrude, who's joining us late in the evening from Uganda. Thank you so much. To Julie, joining us with her experience today, and to the team helping me behind the scenes, Blair Amiot, Sheila Mudaramuka, Chantal Begin, wow, Sula Dimitri, and of course, the wonderful Brenda Jackson. So I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your afternoon. We thank you so much and have a lovely rest of the month. Thanks, everyone.